Sorry. First and foremost, welcome everyone, folks from across the country. I want to thank you for taking the time to join us this evening. My name is Shiva Patel, and I am the Energy Justice Campaigner with the Center for Biological Diversity. I'm thrilled to be one of your co-hosts this evening. And you know, it's an honor and privilege to be here with everyone today. We're gathered on this call today really due to the urgent need for the inclusion of a utility shutoff moratorium, as well as long-term funding in the CARES 2 stimulus package in order really to improve our utility services and make them affordable. Our hosts today are an incredible collective of groups, including Food and Water Action, Corporate Accountability, App Voices, the Partnership for Southern Equity, Democracy Collaborative, and the Center for Biological Diversity, of which I'm a part of. And on that note, I'd like to have my co-hosts for this evening introduce themselves, Alyssa and then Rihanna.
Hi everyone, my name's Alyssa Weinman and I am an Associate Campaign Director at Corporate Accountability. Great to be here.
Hey everyone, and my name is Rihanna Eckel. I'm a senior organizer with Food and Water Action based in Baltimore.
Thank you both. We're also joined tonight by an impressive host of speakers from across the country who are on the forefront of the fights for moratoria on utility shutoffs on both the local and national level. They include Senator Merkley, Representative Dingell, Nyura Sharif, Mayor Steve Calloway, Aaliyah Abid, and Bree Nisley. And I have to say, we're especially honored to be joined by members of Congress this evening. We appreciate your time and we really appreciate you spearheading this cause in Congress from day one, while we here in the public have been right here by your side. They're really going to speak to the work they've been doing organizing for utility access during and following COVID-19, why we need a national moratorium on utility shutoffs, where a moratorium stands with Congress, and most importantly, what you can do to help ensure an immediate moratorium and transformative funding for utilities that are both included in the next stimulus bill. So the agenda for our call tonight will be as follows. We will begin with some context and background of our collective efforts thus far, and that will be led by Alyssa. We'll then hear from our featured speakers. And finally, we will share a call to action by Rihanna. And then we will have a few minutes at the end for a question and answer session. And I want to just take a few minutes, actually just a few moments to talk about our tech for today. So we're very excited that this town hall is being recorded, as well as being live streamed on Facebook on the Mobilize for the Wild page. So welcome everyone on Facebook and welcome to those in the near future who may be watching us on the recording. And just to let you know, the chat function has been disabled. We received a bit of guidance, you know, that the chat box can be a bit distracting. But if you do have questions, and we welcome questions, please make use of the Q&A function, which is at the bottom of your screen. So there should be a Q&A box, and that's right at the bottom. And we will be looking at those and keeping an eye on those questions. And when we have the moment at the end, we're gonna get to those, as many as we can. And we encourage you to follow up with any questions if you have as well. And so I'm going to pass it on to Alyssa, who will speak to the specific moment where we find ourselves in. And again, my name is Shiva, and thank you for being with us this evening.
Thanks so much, Shiva. So I think it comes as no surprise that we are really at an unprecedented time in our history with a global pandemic that's being felt in every facet of our society. There are over 4 million confirmed cases of COVID-19 globally, with the economic and societal ramifications impacting millions more. These impacts are felt differently and albeit more intensely by those in the global South, communities of color, and low-income communities. And here in the US, this pandemic has hospitalized thousands of people, with Black communities in the US contracting the virus and dying at a disproportionate rate. US jobs fell by 22 million in the last month, and low-paying jobs in the retail, service, and hospitality sectors are being hit the hardest, industries that disproportionately employ people of color. And millions of people across industries have been laid off, furloughed, or simply aren't being scheduled to work. People are struggling to make rent payments, continue schooling, pay utility bills, find or keep healthcare coverage, and more. And for millions in the US, unpaid utility bills can result in electricity, water, and broadband shutoffs that only exacerbate this crisis. And as the months continue on, it will become even more difficult for people with existing debt or no income to catch up on these past due bills. However, this problem we're facing with shutoffs is not a new one. In a regular year, 5% of homes experience a water shutoff due to unpaid bills. That's 15 million people a year in the US who lose water access because they can't afford to pay. Additionally, 15 million households per year are vulnerable to power shutoffs. I know this sounds dire, but there is a glimmer of hope, and that's that cities, states, and elected officials, like the ones we have here on this call, are taking action to ensure that everyone has access to water, power, and broadband service by enacting moratoriums or temporary bans on shutoffs during the crisis. And at this moment in time, 15 states and more than 650 localities have suspended water shutoffs, protecting over 210 million people. That's 64% of the US population. And 50% of US cities have protections against power shutoffs. But we're at a time where many municipal and state moratoria on power and water shutoffs have expired or are about to expire, especially in the South, leaving millions of people vulnerable. But more than 1/3 of the country at this moment lacks a water shutoff moratorium. And around 50 states have legal protections against water shutoff or power shutoffs, but we need more. And we know that more than 1/3 of the country still lacks the shutoff moratorium, and by next week, 58% of states will have no legal protections against these shutoffs. And the Federal Communication Commission voluntary pledge for broadband providers to stop service shutoffs during the pandemic that we got was too vague, not universally adopted, and unenforceable. Overall, this has resulted in a patchwork legal system where families are being left behind without legal protections against utility shutoffs. And that's unacceptable. So that's why we need a nationwide moratorium to ensure no family falls through the cracks. And we need protections now.
Thanks, Alyssa. So thankfully, a call for a moratorium on utility shutoffs, the demand for service restoration, and the concept of debt relief for people has been shared far and wide. Last month, more than 830 groups, spearheaded by the conveners of this call this evening, issued a letter to congressional leadership calling on them to implement these demands in the next COVID-19 federal stimulus packages to address some of these mounting economic insecurities caused by the coronavirus pandemic and to help protect the health, well-being, and securities of families across the country. In response to that letter, over 113 members of Congress, led by Senator Merkley and Representative DeFazio, have echoed these calls, which is really exciting. Since then, these calls have been uplifted by leaders in Congress like Minority Leader Schumer, Senator Merkley, Representative Lawrence, Representative Dingell, Representative Tlaib, and Representative DeFazio, who have all spoken to the necessity of action in implementing a moratorium on utility shutoffs and have fought hard to have this language included in the next federal stimulus or CARES 2 package. Congress is in D.C. this week, right now, negotiating on the details of the second major coronavirus relief bill. The draft was actually released earlier today. We didn't plan it, but it turned out to be excellent timing for this call tonight. And it could be voted on as early as this Friday. This bill right now does include a moratorium on water, power, and broadband shutoffs, which is an enormous victory to this movement. So thank you for everyone who has echoed these calls, called their representatives, signed petitions, and so on. We really couldn't have gotten this far without you. But we know that it will be an uphill battle to keep this language in and ensure that it protects all of our neighbors from the threat of a utility shutoff during this challenging time. So that is why we are hosting a national call-in day tomorrow, Wednesday, May 13th, to tell Congress that we need a federal utility shutoff moratorium in the next stimulus package. I'll share more about this call-in day later in the call and how you can get involved, but I hope you'll join us tomorrow by calling your member of Congress and asking them to push congressional leadership to include a shutoff moratorium in this crucial bill and make sure it passes in the final version. Now I'd like to turn it over to Alyssa to introduce our first incredible speaker for this evening.
Awesome. So since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, Senator Merkley has truly led the charge on the national call for water, power, and broadband shutoff moratoriums. And in addition to leading the aforementioned congressional letter that Rihanna mentioned on this issue, he just today introduced a bill calling for a moratorium on broadband shutoffs. So we're really honored to have you speak on these critical issues, Senator Merkley, and I'd love to pass the floor to you.
Okay, great. You can now hear me. Thank you so much, Alyssa and Rihanna and Shiva. And I must say, when there's a coalition of 830 organizations working together, it's really possible to do fundamental work for the people of the United States and overcome the resistance of powerful organizations that try to put roadblocks in place. I think about how when you're facing a disaster, families have fundamental needs for food and shelter. The bill that the House just laid out has an increase in funding for SNAP food, basically, to assist those who are hungry across the nation, help for food banks through the TFAP program, help for renters through a sizable fund to assist those families that are struggling to make their rent payments, and for homeowners to make their mortgage payments. That's a lot of fundamental help that we often think of as the basics of food and shelter. But that's not the only fundamentals. Utilities are essential. Power is essential, and water is essential. Think about the challenge of a family washing their hands as part of protecting themselves from disease without water coming out of the tap. How do you keep food safe without electricity running the refrigerator? How does an older person struggling with congestive heart failure keep their oxygen machine flowing without electricity? How do any of the 30 million people who just lost their jobs search for jobs without internet access? And how do students proceed to keep doing distance learning, whether they're K-12 or they're college students? It's just, these utilities are a fundamental part of how families get through and recover. And if families recover, our economy recovers. We all recover. So this fight against this fight for the moratorium on cutoffs is absolutely an essential part of the puzzle. And I'm just so delighted to see so many organizations come together and realize this is so important and band together. In this call-in day tomorrow, I encourage every one of those 830 organizations, please mobilize your people tomorrow to be part of that call-in. We need to swamp the lines. Most congressional offices have set up links where their phone calls that ring into their office are going to their staff members operating from their home. They're still compiling daily call sheets. They're still telling their member of Congress what people are calling about. So this can work even now. In the bill the House just released, it is very heartening. First of all, they put in funding for a broadband connectivity fund. And the way that they have it designed in there is families can apply through a national lifeline eligibility that you can contact it through the mail, you can contact it by telephone. Obviously, you don't have to have broadband in order to contact them and try to restore broadband. But that connectivity fund, $4 billion, that's excellent. It can pay a broadband company to provide the equipment for broadband, the setup for broadband, and monthly payments for broadband through September of next year. So that's tremendous. And then they did include a moratorium on cutoffs on power, on water, and on broadband. So that is terrific as well. And nothing really happens in Congress without inside champions and outside champions. And if you don't have the two working together, you just don't succeed when there are folks who are not supportive of what you want to accomplish. So I just want to close by saying, job well done. We're halfway there with the House. We really need to push the Senate hard. The Senate leadership doesn't think about the world through Main Street America or ordinary families. They think about the world through Wall Street and mega corporations, and how do you keep those at the top afloat? How do you help out the most powerful? You know, the last bill, at the last minute, the majority leader in the Senate slipped in a provision that sent $170 billion to the richest Americans, another tax reduction. How can we possibly justify doing that? It makes no sense at all. How can any member of the Senate say, I supported $170 billion for the richest Americans, but I'm okay with struggling Americans losing their power, losing their water, losing their broadband? Too bad. We're not there to help them. We're only to help those who don't need help. That's absurd. And we've got to drive that message home and win this battle all the way till it's signed by the president and implemented. So well done. I'm just honored to be a partner with you in this battle. Thank you. Thank you, Alyssa and Rihanna and Shiva. And thank you for all of you in these organizations for coming together in this fight.
Thank you so much, Senator Merkley, and thanks just for all of your leadership on this issue. It's really, really heartening. Following Senator Merkley's great speech, I'm really thrilled to introduce another congressional leader on this work, Representative Dingell. Representative Dingell has really led the charge on water shutoff moratoriums in the House, and his co-lead on the Emergency Water is a Human Right Act with Rep. Tlaib, which was created to stop water shutoffs nationwide and provide low-income water assistance. And it's largely because of her efforts that a moratorium on water, power, and broadband shutoffs is included in the next coronavirus relief bill. Representative Dingell, please share.
Alyssa, thank you, Shiva, Rihanna, for organizing this tonight. And to be with my friend, Senator Merkley, is really wonderful. And it was very exciting to have him introduce the House counterpart of the bill today. And when people work together and you build a coalition and you bring people across the country who care deeply about an issue, you really can make a difference. Everything he said is so totally accurate. And we can, inside the House and the Senate, we try to build coalitions of bringing people together, but that outside voice, that urging people and putting the human face on the issues is so important. So that's why it's so important what you're doing tonight. I really want to thank you for hosting this important virtual town hall on all of the utility shutoff of the utility issues. This really, all of them are important, but this really began for me. My colleague, Rashida Tlaib, who is like a sister to me. Our districts adjoin each other. We get into trouble together. It used to be that they thought of me as the good cop and her the bad cop, but I told her we had people so confused now. I'm the bad cop more than she's the bad cop. But we knew that there was really an urgent need for federal action. So before I really, she laughs at me now, but I became very worried about COVID in January before a lot of other people did, and people were making fun of me. COVID, 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 that's all you talk about. But I knew the impact. And that's when she had been fighting for a long time on water shutoffs in the city of Detroit. But she said, I need your help. And that's what happens when people come together. So I said, well, Rashida, we got to take this seriously. We got to put the human face. So before this shutdown began, or a lot of other people were talking about it, I went to the governor and I said, people in Detroit don't have running water, and we're telling people, you've got to wash your hands for 20 seconds. That's the single most important thing that we can do. And so many of them don't have running water. Or think about what it's like to live in a house that doesn't have a bathroom or a toilet that works. I want people to really understand what it means not to have running water. And then after Rashida and I worked very hard that weekend, we got to the governor, Mike Duggan, the mayor, and I had some long, very blunt talks. And they did an initial announcement that they were going to give people access if they called one of the nonprofits. I came back and at a leadership meeting said to the speaker, Madam Speaker, this is getting real. And do you realize that there are people across the country that don't have running water? And all our public health experts, this was before everybody started saying a lot of other stuff, are saying we got to all wash our hands. We say it, but it's got meaning. And there are too many people that can't wash their hands. And that day she engaged, and we've been on this journey ever since. Access to clean water is a human right. And at a time when people have to stay home, we have to make sure that everybody has this access to running water in their homes. Many communities and states like Michigan have stepped up to not turning off water or other utilities. And that is very important, what Senator Merkley was talking about. I have said to people, the structure or framework for a civil society is to have running water, electricity, and cable. I want you to think about what we'd be like right now, heading into our 9th week of stay at home in many states without those 3 things, and what would happen to our society. But we need federal action. We got a patchwork of moratoriums throughout the country, and in many states, Rihanna and Alyssa were talking about this before, it's set to expire. Here we are. We know this is going to last for a year until we have a vaccine. And people might talk about turning off people's water or electricity. No, it doesn't work. And the reason, by the way, I really was just going to talk about water, but broadband is so critical because we don't know what's going to happen in school this fall. And again, the burden falls disproportionately on people who can't afford it. They don't have access to broadband. Rural areas don't have access to broadband, and they're already disproportionately impacted because they don't have the resources, they don't have the schools, they don't have the teachers, they don't have everything that everybody has. And that's why this bill is so important, because everybody deserves to be taken care of right now during this pandemic. People shouldn't have to worry about how they're going to eat, where they're going to live, how they're going to pay their rent, if they've got to go to the doctor, whether they can go to a doctor, and whether they have running utilities. I want to go, and I really want to tell you she couldn't be here, but Rashida Tlaib is totally my partner in this. I would not be in this as deeply and as passionately. I care about it, but the two of us together were determined to get this done, and it is in the care bill today that came out because of Energy and Commerce, because the two of us never let anybody alone until it was there. And I really want you to know that. Water shutoffs disproportionately impact cities with the higher rates of poverty, unemployment, and people of color. Earlier this year, for example, the city of Detroit that I talked about before estimated that there were 2,800 occupied homes with no water service. None. This issue spans well beyond Detroit, however. According to the Food and Water Action, water shutoffs to low-income households are prevalent in all 50 states. Again, people want to kind of always, they say, oh, it's Detroit or this city or not. They don't realize it's in all 50 states. According to the CDC, we've heard about how that being able to wash your hands is one of the most important things. Many municipalities and states have issued moratoriums on the water shutoffs in the last few weeks, But we've got to ensure a comprehensive federal response accompanies these actions, which is why the CARE bill is so important and why your call tomorrow matters so much. In April, Rashida and I, who had been working on this all year, introduced the Emergency Water is a Human Right Act, because no person living in the United States should be forced to survive without safe and clean water. Our bill had over 60 other members supporting it in introduction, and the bill would specifically prohibit service providers from disconnecting or interrupting a household water service during the COVID-19 emergency period. It would also, as Senator Merkel said, authorize $1.5 billion in ratepayer assistance to low-income communities. You saw that it came out today, and we have a strong commitment from both in the House Democratic leadership means it's going to be there, and it was, and from Senator Schumer, but that's a hint to you. There are other people that you need to target, like maybe Republicans, so they don't try to strip it as they have in other bills. And you know what? There's a presidential election this year. Put a human face. I want you to help put human faces as people are campaigning so they understand what is at stake. It's been a long fight, but we're going to need each other as we do this. And I'm really glad that Senator Merkel introduced the companion bill today. So we can work together to get this done. I do believe I'm also an optimist, and I look at what's happened the last couple of months, although some of you know me, most of you don't. I am the last human being that you could ever think could live in a house by herself for 59 days. People wouldn't have put a penny on my being able to do it for 59 minutes. It's hard. And it's hard for a lot of people, and we need to think about that too. But what I want to say to you as we're having this is I think people are paying attention. I think that we used to talk about a lot of these issues, and it was just easy to ignore it, or people didn't understand. I think that we have put a microscope on the fractures and the fault lines in our society, and we need to use this as an opportunity to make sure that no one callously wants to shut someone's water off ever again. Water is a human right. That we have to figure out how we permanently help lower income people who have a utility problem pay those bills. And we need to make sure as a society and a community, we are watching out for those who need a helping hand. We deserve that to everyone. It's not a handout, it's a hand up. Thank you for the work you're doing, and what you're going to do tomorrow really matters. We'll get the vote on Friday in the House, and then, my friends, we got to go to work on that Senate. Those are tough boys. There are a few women that'll help, but the boys are tough. Excuse me, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Representative Dingell. And it's just so great to hear our elected officials echo the fact that water is in fact a human right, and seeing leadership that you and Representative Tlaib and everyone else is taking. So thank you again.
Thank you.
I'm honored now to introduce another Michigan activist, Nyura Sharif, who's the executive director of Flint Rising, and an incredible grassroots activist who's led the charge for water justice and no shutoffs in Flint, in Michigan, and beyond. So thanks for joining us, Nyura.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum and Ramadan Mubarak for those who are fasting. March 28th, Michigan was the first state in the nation to pass a water shutoff moratorium. And then 15 more states followed suit, including Puerto Rico. And now there are only 3 states, including Michigan, that is mandating reconnections. Now, I have fought for several years during the Flint water crisis and after to make sure that people have running water, because in my community, not having running water, not only before this global pandemic, you were in jeopardy of losing your home through the unpaid water bills going on to your tax rolls. And also you will be able to like communities and families would have their families separated through having their children removed from their homes and put into foster care because they did not have running water. Now added on to this, a global pandemic where they're saying that the only thing that you can do is wash your hands. For families that do not have running water, that is a trigger. And it does, like, on top of not having running water, there is no dignity in going and trying to find water when there is no water to be found in the grocery stores. Or you can only try to survive and make value judgments off of one case of bottled water, which is about 20 to 40 bottles. Now in Flint, we have water pickup stations where people are waiting 2 to 3 hours to get 2 cases of water. Now, there is no dignity in that. And as we are fighting for water reconnections, because even though we have this moratorium, it is up to the grassroots activists, because our states and the federal government has, like, relinquished control of ensuring that we, instead of us having and living in a just society where water is a human right and people do not have water shutoffs due to inability to pay, unfortunately, that does not like hold true in within the United States, because we do not have that. Water is seen as something, as an economic driver. And during the water crisis, I was paying $200 a month for 2 people in my home for water that I could not drink and was making me sick. And now, in the midst of a global pandemic, we have people in Flint who have compromised immune systems who are now forced to go out and get get water, which is just terrible. Like, I am immunosuppressed from the water crisis. I have severe asthma now, and I'm afraid to leave my house. Fortunately, I do have running water, so I'm able to wash my hands as many times as I want, but I know that every time people in my community go out to trying to get bottled water, or their water is still making them sick, because we still have not had full justice and reparations in Flint. It is very disheartening, because we have had 6 years of living through this water crisis, which was like one pandemic. And now we have another pandemic that is tied to the coronavirus, and knowing that not having running water, and knowing that people who are immunosuppressed and have asthma and are elderly and have high blood pressure, which are also things that are prevalent in Black and brown communities across the country, because you're also living in these communities that have, like, high industries, that dirty industries that are killing our communities slowly. And now we have this layered global pandemic that is killing our communities at a rapid pace. Knowing that this is something that isn't really tracked, because I would say after this pandemic, maybe there will be some epidemiologists that will see how many people who are tested positive to see if they did have running water. That would be an interesting choice. But right now, like, we don't have time to wait for our communities to die for us to take action, because right now our communities are basically put in front of a firing squad right now. And we do need this moratorium at a federal level, because as we have communities and states do not necessarily have the bandwidth or the infrastructure to mandate this, our federal government has the infrastructure and hopefully the vision that they will finally care about communities and not just care about corporations and the 1%. Because we are people, these hundreds of millions of people who live in the United States right now, who are facing this pandemic, we are the real economy. Like, it is our hard work and knowing that we are out here, we're the real economy. Like, Wall Street is the fake economy. And we should not be putting our communities at risk so we can die for Wall Street and for profit margins. Thank you.
Thank you, Nyura, for sharing your story and the work you've been doing and all of your leadership. So as we push for utility protections and keeping them there in the next federal stimulus package, we also applaud the municipalities who've taken the steps necessary to ensure that people in their cities have access to essential utilities. And one such city is Hillsboro, Oregon. So we're now going to hand it over to Mayor Callaway to share a bit more about the importance of protecting critical utility services.
Very good, thank you. It's an honor to participate. So thank you, to Rihanna, Alyssa, and Shiva again for how well this has been organized. Being from Oregon, I would like to acknowledge and thank Senator Merkley for his wonderful service to our state and also his partnership with our city. Hillsboro is about 15 miles west of Portland in the northwest quadrant of our state. We are a city that has been, incorporated in the late 1800s, deep agricultural roots, but now a very strong high-tech presence. We also have a strong presence of outdoor industry as well, and we have one of the younger counties in the state of Oregon. We own our own water system, and I'm so grateful to the city leaders generations ago who made that decision, and it benefits us as a city economically, but it certainly benefits our residents as well. Again, I cannot overstate the importance of the fact that we own our own water system. We're also in the process of expanding our water system, our water infrastructure, to make sure that we are able to meet our water supply and water needs 50 years from now as well. Now, when, again, shout out to Senator Merkley, whose WIFIA legislation allowed us to borrow funds at a discounted rate, which will save our ratepayers millions of dollars over the course of paying back, the loans for this construction. So again, what Senator Merkley has done is great for the country. It's also great for those of us here in Oregon. So while we're poised for the future, we also are experiencing the same pandemic locally, state, county, in country that everybody is. And so when this first hit, realizing that the majority of families don't have an extra $500 for an emergency, whether that be a car repair, a health emergency, we realized that this is going to hit so many people so hard. And so we decided that we wanted to make sure that there was a moratorium, on any late fees, on any shutoffs, and we made sure that the very few people that were experiencing a shutoff situation, that everybody's water was reconnected, because we knew that this was going to have deep and long-lasting effects. It's also important to note that Portland General Electric, PGE, which is different than PG&E, which has had multiple problems down in California. So PGE was also, a leader in that. And they came out even before our city did, and they said, there's no shutoffs, there's no late fees, there's no disconnects. And so I want to give a shout out to them, as well as Northwest Natural, because they are great partners for us in making sure that every person in Hillsboro has those key essential utilities in place. And so, we are a city that's about 40% people of color, and we have over 100,000 people. And of that, about 25,000 of our residents are Latino. A number of them are undocumented. And so we wanted to make sure, since some of the government programs, well, most of the government programs do not provide any relief to them, this was also a way then that we could make sure that all of our residents were getting some government benefit and government support. And again, a shout out to PGE, because they also have made sure that hundreds of thousands of dollars have gone to social service agencies throughout their service area to help with rent assistance and utility assistance as well. So it's important to know that even though we're currently under a state of emergency in Hillsboro, we are not looking to be compassionate now. And then when the pandemic is passed and the state of emergency has been lifted, that all of a sudden we're going to forget to be compassionate and thoughtful and caring and understanding. So we recognize that people's bills are stacking up, credit card and, in house payments or rent, all of that is stacking up. And so just because the economy will begin to open doesn't mean that people all of a sudden have the money to pay all of the bills that have built up. So, we are moving forward to make sure, that our moratorium continues. And that's why it's important. I would love to see across the country the same sort of corporate responsibility and municipal responsibility that we are seeing right here in Oregon through Portland General Electric, Northwest Natural. And I do want to acknowledge that there's many, many cities throughout Oregon that have put the same moratorium on their water and utility shutoffs as well. So Hillsborough is not alone in that, and I'm very proud of our city, as well as so many Oregon cities that are doing the same thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing, Mayor Callaway, all the great work that's happening in Hillsborough. I'm excited to now introduce Aliyah Abid, who is with Baltimore City College High School as a senior. And she's also a student organizer with the Baltimore Students Organizing a Multicultural Open Society, or SOMOS. And we're also joined by her teacher and SOMOS advisor, Franca Mueller-Paz. So thanks for joining us, both of you.
Thank you for having me and having us and giving me the opportunity to speak about something that's been very important to our city lately. So as everyone knows, like the internet is essential for a student. It's essential for a lot of people, most people in this time period, but it's definitely essential for people that have jobs that are now having their work online. They have trainings online. My mom personally has done multiple trainings online, which she would not have been able to do if we did not have internet at home. You also have schoolwork that's still being given out. People still are held accountable and responsible for turning things in online. And the reality is a lot of places don't have as many devices that are needed to students, and they also don't have good internet access. Like, for example, in Baltimore City, according to the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, 22% of Baltimore households don't have broadband internet. And then if you exclude mobile data plans, the number goes up to 40%, 40.7%. So this puts Baltimore as the third highest rate of digitally disconnected households of any city with more than 500,000 residents. And the reason why this is such an issue beyond that is even the United Nations has stated, they emphasize that internet access is a right. It's a basic human right. In one of their reports, they stated that their mission is to push for a world where everyone can create, access, utilize, and share information and knowledge, enabling people to achieve their full potential and improve their quality of life. And this is not being met in the US, but it's being met in other countries. A few countries responded to that, and they made plans to get internet across their country. They have, in Finland, for example, they are far surpassing. And, people can say, oh, Finland is smaller and, Finland is liberal or this or that. But I mean, at the same time, Finland made it happen, and other countries like Estonia have made it happen. And Finland is the happiest country in the world. So, I mean, can the US be happy? I don't know. So as people have mentioned, it's like connectivity has been a big problem in rural areas because houses are spread out and a lot of people don't have access. And there's also a big problem in cities, especially cities with high poverty rates, such as Baltimore. So the Federal Communications Commission, or the FCC, some people may know them for the whole net neutrality issue back in like 2016. 2016. They opened a voluntary pledge for companies with internet, that provide internet, to say, oh, we won't shut down the internet. We won't shut off internet if people haven't paid for it. But that's a voluntary pledge. No one's being held accountable. Companies have still done shutoffs. When people complain, they'll bring it back, but they still cut off people's internet, which prevents them from doing what they need to do in this current time during the pandemic and just in general. And really the pandemic is it's only highlighting an issue that we've already had, because if people already had internet access and people already had connection to do what they need to do online, then this wouldn't even be a discussion at this point. It wouldn't be a problem. And now people can take notice because that's one of the things they can focus on. So specifically, I want to talk about Baltimore and like what we've been doing to kind of combat this issue. So right now in Baltimore, there's what we call, it's a group of 70 plus organizations and teachers and students. And we've even got 2 councilmen on our team. It's called the Digital Equity Coalition. Shout out to Councilman Zeke Cohen and City Council President Brandon Scott. Thank you guys for supporting us. Thank you. God bless. So firstly, the coalition has got our Mayor Jack Young, to approve $3 million from the Youth Fund to provide internet access and devices to students in the city, right? Or young people in school and students in the city, despite the fact that Baltimore City Public Schools has been underfunded for decades. I mean, we know this because if you look at how Maryland presents, Maryland defines what adequate funding for schools is, Baltimore schools have been short of $3 billion over the past 2 decades. And there was the Kerwin bill for that, but our governor vetoed it. So that will not be helping us right now unless we get that overturned. But that's something else. We still have that $3 million, which is amazing. Another thing, people have been coming together, and our coalition has been working with Baltimore public schools to bring internet to communities that are close to certain schools, especially like ones with, immigrant families or like impoverished families. Now, it's only been a few schools so far, but they've gotten mesh technology to expand and reach different antennas. So mesh networks are basically like internet from the schools go out to connect with these satellites, and then people near these satellites can access the internet. The issue is it's hard to maintain and it's very expensive to maintain, but it's a temporary solution that we have right now. Baltimore, really, I mean, we don't have money, so we're relying on our provider, Comcast. And Comcast is a monopoly in Baltimore, so that's who we have to work with. And they made a really great gesture. The Comcast Essentials package, if you have heard of it, it's, it was $10 before, and now they have it for free for eligible families, low-income families. The issue, though, is it's still not enough. So we've been working with Comcast, and we're trying to ask them for more speeds, because currently the package offers a 25 megabits per second download speed, which is about enough for 2 devices, and then to use the internet. But then their upload speed is only 3 megabits per second, which, I'm sorry, I'm like speaking tech, but like, okay, basically that's too slow for video conferences. Like that's a bare minimum. But all of these things, all of these speeds, 25, 3, they can only be met in optimal situations. And Baltimore is not having optimal circumstances. You have to have a good router, and if people have older routers, that's going to slow their speed down. And if people, like our city, if people were to have fiber optic wires in our city, then the speeds could be faster. But we have cable broadband internet, which is slower, and that slows it down too. So here you have people they're paying for 200 megabits per second. So they're paying, okay, I'll forget the megabits for a second. They're paying for 200 speed, they're getting like 50. People are paying for 100, they're getting 30. So imagine what it's like for the Internet Essentials users. These are the people that need it the most. They're the people that, they're taking advantage of this because they did not have internet before. And everyone, even Comcast, recognizes that you need internet at this time, especially. So basically, I just want to say, like, we've been working really hard and we should not have to. This should have been addressed. This shouldn't be an issue. You know, we've got students, teachers, all these people that don't have to be involved in the government. And here we are taking our time out, you know, students who have AP exams, people like me who have projects due this week. We're working and we're pushing for this and there's groups across the country that are pushing for this in Philadelphia, different places, and it's students, teachers, everybody. They shouldn't have to. Why should different groups have to push for this when it could be addressed federally? And this affects people of all ages. And that's why we need to make sure it stays in the bill when it's voted on this Friday. Nobody should take it out. Nobody, you know, last minute, someone that I can't remember who mentioned it, but like, not to throw Republican, you know, leaders under the bus or anything, but, you know, no Republicans take it out of the bill. We need to make sure we have all three of these things met: utilities, water, and internet, broadband internet access for all. We need to make sure that people are not getting cut off from what they need. So please, please, please call your Congress people, call your representatives, please call them, let them know that you care about this, that their people care about this, and that you want to keep this in the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. I can hear my housemates cheering for you downstairs. That was amazing. And we feel so energized to keep doing this fight. So thank you so much. We're going to kick it last to Bree Neasley from Appalachian Voices for Energy Democracy, where she works as a campaign coordinator out in Tennessee and works with communities fighting for democracy, equity, and clean energy at their public power companies.
Thanks, Alyssa. Appreciate it. Hey, y'all. Yeah, again, my name is Bree Neasley. I work with Appalachian Voices based out of Knoxville, Tennessee, and I use she, her pronouns. Over the last 2 months, I've been working with other organizations and a coalition called the Tennessee Valley Energy Democracy Movement. You can find us on Facebook, to push for an end to electricity shutoffs, actually all utility shutoffs during the pandemic here in Tennessee. Our movement is working to create a cleaner, more equitable, and democratic public power system here in the Tennessee Valley. So when the pandemic hit and we started hearing stories of utility shutoffs, we decided to track our power companies, and we found out that there were many that hadn't implemented moratoriums. And so after 2 months of fighting to stop utility shutoffs in Tennessee, I can't say enough how critical it is for Congress to pass a moratorium in the next CARES package. Electricity is a basic resource that a lot of folks probably don't think about as they use it throughout the day. But if you're someone who's ever had your electricity shut off, you know what it's like to not be able to cook, heat or cool your house, charge your phone, or even turn your lights on, and what that means if you're a family with young kids. And until Congress passes a moratorium, millions of families are facing that reality during the most severe economic and public health crisis of our lifetime. I grew up in a rural community, and I do a lot of my work in parts of rural East Tennessee. And in rural areas especially, families tend to spend a large portion of their income on their electricity bills. That's called energy burden. So even before the pandemic started, energy burden in rural areas was a problem. And that problem is now more severe because folks don't have work, or they can't risk an exposure to COVID-19 by going to work. And rural communities are also more likely to experience pulmonary health issues like COPD and black lung disease, which makes them more vulnerable to the virus and also makes many dependent on home oxygen use. And yeah, some of the folks who are on the call probably know that if you're medically dependent on electricity, a shutoff could mean life or death. And that includes folks who are on oxygen, but also folks who have to store their medication in refrigerators. And if you're rural and your electricity gets shut off when you're medically dependent on it, it's really difficult to get to a neighbor's house or get help in time. Here in Tennessee and parts of our surrounding states, we're in a region that's pretty unique because we're served entirely by publicly owned electric companies. Our power is produced by the Tennessee Valley Authority, which is a federal utility, and it's distributed to us by municipal utilities and rural electric cooperatives, which are owned by cities or they're owned by their members. Mayor Callaway mentioned that they own their water company. They've been able to implement a moratorium. Unfortunately, in Tennessee, and for a lot of folks with public utilities across the country, having public power also means that our electric companies, or sometimes our water utilities, aren't regulated in the same way that private utilities are. So in Tennessee, when our Utilities Commission ordered a moratorium on shutoffs back in March, the roughly 80 or so public power companies that provide our electricity didn't have to follow that mandate. Several of these utilities haven't stopped shutoffs, and many of them that have are now allowing their mandates to expire. We've been tracking shutoff stories and have spoken with folks that have had to choose between their electricities and their groceries, and then have been charged reconnection fees to get their power back on. Someone on our team at Appalachian Voices actually spoke with a woman here in Tennessee last week whose power has been shut off twice since March already. Some folks we talked to have been fortunate enough to have never missed a power bill before the pandemic, but they're now having their power shut off during a time when we all really need it. Groups in the Tennessee Valley Energy Democracy Movement, which is that coalition I mentioned before, there's dozens of groups that have been fighting incredibly hard to try and get a moratorium here. In the last 2 months, we have organized phone banks, we've organized letter campaigns, we've built coalitions around this, we've flooded live streams, and we've even protested in our cars around the state capitol building. We've asked our Governor Bill Lee, we've pressured the trade association that represents our utilities, and we put pressure on the Tennessee Valley Authority to stop shutoffs, and we still haven't seen a moratorium. We're gonna keep fighting for equity and democracy in our power system here in the Tennessee Valley, but we need all you folks who are on the call to please call leadership tomorrow and ask them to pass a utility shutoff moratorium with the next CARES package. And I think now you're gonna get some information on how to do that right before we end this call. Back to y'all.
Yes, thank you so much, Bree. I just want to say that all of these speakers have been truly incredible, and I'm so moved to hear about all of the powerful work that is happening in my own city of Baltimore and across the country to ensure that everyone has access to power, water, and broadband. Thank you all so much for joining us and for sharing your parts in this fight and for being with us moving forward. As you've heard from all of our speakers, by making our voices heard by Congress, we can build on the work that has already been done and ensure that a shutoff moratorium is included in the next CARES bill and stays in the next CARES bill. So like I shared earlier, tomorrow is a national no shutoffs call-in day where we will ask our representatives to push congressional leadership on ensuring a shutoff moratorium stays in the bill. Tomorrow morning, everyone who registered for this call will receive an email to the email that you registered with instructions, a number to call, and a sample message that you can say when you call your representative. There are a lot of competing priorities right now. There are so many important things that we need to provide for our communities, but that means that we need to build even more power in order to win on no shutoffs. So that's why we need no shutoffs team coordinators who will help drive more calls into offices. So that's where you all come in. We're launching a poll right now to ask you to become a no shutoffs team coordinator. By signing up, you are committing to help get more calls from your friends, your families, and your neighbors, and we'll send you a toolkit in order to be successful that will have a draft email, social media posts, etc. that you can share. So please note that if you've joined by phone, you won't be able to see this poll, but you will get an email tomorrow morning giving you the opportunity to sign up as well. And so folks should see that poll popping up on their screen now. If you don't, again, no worries, you'll get the email. But while we give folks a minute just to fill out this poll, let me tell you briefly why this is so important. calls to representatives are the most effective way to create change, because by picking up the phone and calling an office instead of just signing a petition, it signifies that an issue is really important to someone in that representative's district. They figure that, you know, if this issue is so important to you that you're making a call, it's probably really important to a lot of other people who just aren't making that call. So by asking friends, family, and neighbors to call, we can put even more pressure on our leaders to do the right thing by all people, and suspend utility shutoffs in the next CARES bill. So like I said, we'll send everything that you need in order to be successful and help generate calls. So we hope that you'll sign up to be a No Shutoffs team coordinator. Thanks for everyone. Thank you to everyone who signed up, and I think we can close the poll now, and I'll turn it back to Shiva to close us out for the night. Thanks.
Thank you, Rihanna. Thank you, Alyssa. Thank you, everyone. Our speakers, wonderful speakers, members of Congress included, and everyone for joining. I want to recognize that I really appreciate everyone staying on. It's 9 o'clock here in Washington, D.C. And we've had literally the majority of you stay on with us. We really appreciate that. And we're going to follow up, and we're going to say good night. But I'm going to say just one last thing, that we really respect and appreciate your questions on this issue. That's part of why we had this. We will be following up, and please feel free to email any of us, or respond to any of the emails you've got from registering. Once again, good night, everyone. Thank you so much. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we look forward to everyone joining in on our calls tomorrow.